So the application process for the Gates is a little bit different than it is for most of the other scholarships. You'll see in the packet that Denise handed out that there is no interview process at Amherst first. What you do is you apply to Cambridge first. You apply to a program at Cambridge, to both a school and to a department, and you find out from them first whether or not you got into the department. I applied to 2 different departments, found out that I got into one. And then once you do get into one, you're ranked by that department. They send those rankings to the Gates people who make the decisions, and they get about 800 of those ranked applications. Then they look through those, they pick about 90 people to interview, and then they choose about 30 after the interview. And internationally, they choose another 60. So it's 90 Gates scholars every year, pretty much. The application itself, like I said to Denise earlier, there's only 3 letters of recommendation, but I would say that makes them even more important. You want to make sure that you really have been working closely with professors during your time here. Thesis advisors are great because you've been working one-on-one with them. If you do any extracurriculars and are close to the person who advises those extracurriculars, that's helpful as well. I had 2 from professors and 1 from one of the attorneys at the law office that I work in. So there's 2 that are supposed to be more scholarly, and then there's 1 that's a personal recommendation. It's a little bit shorter, and that only goes to the Gates, that personal recommendation. You also turn in a pretty extensive writing, an example of your writing. So I turned in a chapter of my senior thesis, and there are 2 essays that you write. The first is supposed to be just sort of this is what I want to study, and that's one of the things that the department looks at when they're deciding whether to accept you. And then the other is just sort of a supplemental, this is why I want the Gates, this is what I think it'll do for me, and all that. I think the basic things to include in those two different essays, why that country in particular. There are many different choices on what countries you want to go to, and you really do need to make a strong argument for why that country works for you. For me, just like Daniel was saying, there's sort of a different focus in the UK on his subject. For me as well, in criminology, in the United States, it's a little bit more statistics-driven, it's a little bit more sociology-based, but in the UK, it's more theoretical, which is more down my alley because I can't do math. So the second thing that I would say is also why that school in particular. Why you want to, if there's someone important there that you want to study with, you can get in touch with professors before you've even applied and say, this is what I'm interested in studying. Would you be willing to work with me on this? And usually they're pretty responsive when you do that. Also, why your research is important, why your specific topic is important, why it hits the fellowship goals, and then I think the most important thing is how it relates to the other research in your field. For that, you want to do a lot of research. You want to read as many books, as many articles as you can. You want to talk to all of your professors and sort of streamline your thought process. They will have, they'll be very helpful in suggesting readings for you. And I think it's very important to sort of survey as much information as possible. You don't have to be an expert in all of the articles that you read, but you should. You want to get a broad idea of what other scholarship is going on in that field. And in my application, I actually specifically cited a few of the authors that I'd read, talked about how I would use them, and then also how my research would go beyond what I had seen in their research. So I think that's very important for them to see that you've done sort of the legwork in figuring out what you want to study, and that you know exactly what you're doing once you hit the ground, so you can hit the ground running.